Well, it's not too often on the OHL podcast that we get a guest, the caliber of the guest that joins us today. If you were to look at the 1981 NHL entry draft, you would see the name Dale Hawerchuk, former Cornwall Royal, taken first overall, and right behind Hawerchuk, in front of guys like Fuhrer and Francis and a whole bunch of others, you're going to see the name Doug Smith. And Doug's story goes so far beyond hockey that it would be impossible for me to encapsulate. So let's just begin by welcoming the number 2 overall selection in the 81 NHL draft, Doug Smith, to the program. Thanks for making time for us, Doug.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
So much to talk about when it comes to your story. And I think your story beyond hockey is probably the most meaningful. But because we are what we are with this podcast, I have to start with the Ottawa 67s, and that's your hometown, and you end up playing for them. I think you started your first year was as an underager, but how did it come to pass that you were on the ice with Brian Kilray behind the bench?
Well, it was when Brian was making his move from Ottawa West to the Ottawa 67s, and you know, my mom became the secretary of the ODHA, the Ottawa District Hockey Association, basically to align everything with Brian's move and like protecting me at the ODHA level. And so I learned well after my career was over how much of this was scripted. So much of getting there is timing.
Everything that you have done in the game beyond the recovery from your horrific injury. There are so many stories connected to it, but you mentioned in your book, Thriving in Transition, that the biggest goal you scored in hockey was one you scored while a member of the Ottawa 67s, a playoff game penalty shot.
Yeah, it's one of those the shaking hands you never forget, right? I'm like I remember that feeling. And in front of a sold out crowd, to have a chance to take it and to succeed at it off the crossbar, it makes me sweat right now. It makes me feel like I'm experiencing it all over again.
You talk about succeeding at it, and I think that's going to be a recurring theme here in our conversation because it is my sense that you have taken away from your athletic career a number of building blocks that have become the foundation for what it is you do today. And I think it's all connected to the success that an athlete, especially one of your caliber, strives for each and every day.
Yeah, it's really like I ask myself endlessly, why did I get this second chance? Um, and for anybody to get a second chance like this, so many of them make the best of it, and I've just been working at making the best of it because when my career ended, it ended all of a sudden, and I knew it was over. Um, and I knew my life was in the balance. I made a commitment that if I was to survive that impact that I experienced, that I would do better than I ever could as a professional athlete. And so that's what I've been trying to do, and just figuring out along the way, and I guess attracting a lot of the best coaches still the best business coaches and motivational coaches. They find me for some reason, just like Scotty Bowman and Pat Quinn found me. So if you put it out there in the world, it's going to come and find you. That's what I found in my life.
Yeah, Scotty Bowman, Pat Quinn, Glenn Sather would have been in there. Roger
Yep.
Nielsen was in there. Rogie Vachon. We can about coaching and managing, but a hell of a hockey player for sure. I mean, they either found you or you made your way to them, one way or the other.
Yeah, and I'm doing it again, with the people that I know today, and the business people who have helped me, the storytellers who have helped me organize my story, the business coaches who have helped me, organize it and get it in position to be able to distribute it, to be able to go on a show like this and make it available for people, right on the show, so they can just go digitally and grab it and use what they need. They don't have to use the whole thing, but use a part of it because it's a system we're living in. So use a part of my system.
As you look back, Doug, what was it that was driving you as a young hockey player? And I wonder, were you even aware of it at the time? Or maybe you look at it now and think, you were chasing the NHL dream like so many Canadian kids do, but really it was about something else. But when you look back on yourself as that 17, 18-year-old hockey player, what was driving you?
Well, I mean, I had a lot of belief in self, but I was also diagnosed with ADHD when I was very young. So in my lifetime, I've managed in many sports to be able to manage spin and to be able to manage high speed multi-object tracking. And so I'm very good at that because of something I was diagnosed with when I was 13. And so hockey just came natural because it's all about how the puck spins, right? And it's all about centrifugal force and turning and the underneath leg and all those things just seem to make sense to me. I was on the ice all the time because I grew up on the Ottawa River, and across the street from my house was the outdoor rink on Granville Road in Ottawa, and so I had ice on both sides of the house. So what are you going to do? You're going to go out and play. And then my dad wanted me to play on his outdoor team when I was 12 or 13. And you end up feeling what it's like to run into, a 200-pound, 250-pound man, when you're 12, 13, and you learn how to avoid it.
That makes me think of all those coaches we talked about. I didn't ask for anything specific about Brian Kilray. What was it like playing for him? What did he mean to your career as a junior player?
Well, he builds belief in self. That's what he's an expert at. He finds the holes in your belief, and that's what he does. He taught me that, and then he supports the weak spots in your belief system. And the challenge with that is he really hones in on whether you're ready to make the change you need to make to be a better hockey player, because you can't he traps the mind in a way, right? So that you expose yourself to him, and if he doesn't like what he sees, then he can't keep you around. If you haven't made the decision yet that you're going to just stick your head in there every time, then it's not going to work out right now. You might get another chance down the road, but that's what they're looking for in the sports industry, right? They're making it safer, but you got to be prepared to go full throttle.
As that 1981 NHL draft approached, how confident were you about where it was that you were going to be selected? Ultimately, of course, as mentioned, number 2 overall.
I was just playing the game because I loved it. I don't even remember the draft in Montreal. I just have no recollection of it. It's like there's a part of my life that's sort of wiped out because there was just so much coming at me, so fast, so much being said about me so fast. I can't imagine what it's like today for the young guys who are going high in the draft with the digital technology that we didn't have back then. It must be extremely traumatic at times for a lot of these players. It must affect them dramatically.
That is very interesting to me. And I'm glad you mentioned the modern player because that's the first thing I started thinking about. And I know you made reference in your book to the hockey calendar, if you will. And really, there's no end date on it these days. And there wasn't much of one when you were playing either. It's basically year round.
Well, yeah. I had to stop playing lacrosse because it was lacrosse or hockey for me, and the two started intersecting. And today it's like that was back in '81, like in the late '70s, early '80s, and today now it's a science. And so if you're not subscribing to technology that speeds up the brain, technology that makes you stronger, faster, the way you think and how your thinking affects your brain cells and whether the brain is coding or whether it's being conscious, so all these things are important now to success. So it's almost like uh, everybody's got to be as smart as a football player. When I watch football players and all the plays they got to learn now, it's almost the same for hockey now. It's amazing. We didn't have all that, right?
There's no question, though, when we look back at your record of success in the game for sure, to say nothing of your record of success post playing career. But at the time, you were pretty driven, pretty focused. And as I recall, that first pro training camp with the Los Angeles Kings, the team that drafted you, you might have gone in with a little bit more fire and or passion than the veterans on that team did.
Well, I went in without a contract. Crazy, huh? Second pick overall, 18 years old, first year of the 18-year-old draft, goes to Victoria, BC to training camp with the LA Kings without a contract. I ended up leaving 3 days into training camp, but the first couple of days were, I was told, slow down or you're going to get a beating. And I didn't know what they meant. And to me, though, on the hockey rink, that meant speed up. And so, you know, it was like the fuel of wanting to slow me down got met with the fuel of me wanting to prove them wrong. And you can only sustain that for so long. So you know, the culture at that time was so much different, and they were adjusting to what was to come.
In junior, you were able to capture the Academic Player of the Year award. What did that mean to you? What did it tell you about yourself?
Hey, Gordie Howe, it was the time I met Gordie Howe, and Gordie signed it for me. He presented it to me. It was absolutely amazing. And I look back on it today and what I was accomplishing in school. I think a large part of it was because I was so healthy. You know, I was so fit. I was so focused, you know, at that 17, 18-year-old time in my life. And so I got the work done. So if you're struggling out there and listen to this podcast, you can get the work done. You know, make the adjustments you need to make. You know, let me know, and I can probably help you grab a couple more percentage points.
How did you ultimately figure it out, if you will, for the National Hockey League, earn that contract, start playing with the Los Angeles Kings?
Well, I was playing because I loved it. And you know, the challenge is when you love it, you can do anything, right? You just, when you have no fear and you love it, go for it. But after a few years in LA at that time, I started playing hockey because I was good at it. And there's a big difference between doing something that you love and doing something because you're good at it. And so, you know, that was an awakening that I talk about in my book, and it's one of the key points that, you know, people need to be aware of.
What do you mean by that? What's the difference between playing it because you love it and playing it because you're good at it?
Well, you know, I was going to the rink after years in LA, what was happening down there at the time, and I just wasn't happy going to the rink. I didn't want to go to the office. Like when you wake up Monday mornings and you hate going to your job, you have to consider whether, you know, that's going to shave years off your life, but you don't know what's happening to you. It's a slow conditioning. And so as a young player, it wasn't set up for me, and I grew to hate the environment after a few years, and it became something that I didn't love anymore. And when you don't love it, you know, it makes you unhappy, and happiness is important, right? You only get so many kicks at the can.
I got to think there had to be at least a bit of time, Smitty, that you were pretty okay as a young man in the early 1980s with a pro hockey contract living in Los Angeles.
Oh, elated. Elated. I was surfing. I was living on the beach. I was driving a Porsche. You know, and I was 18. The guys didn't really like me having a Porsche because I had the only Porsche on the team. Now today they've all got something fancy, right? And so I was loving it as an 18-year-old, like just seeing Los Angeles and you know, that just it was a fantastic experience from that perspective. But when you go to your job, when you're working around a group of people, and that's the nature of my work today, it's important that you're happy in that environment. And it grew to a point where, you know, I wasn't happy, and I was begging to be traded, and it took 2 years. Today they just have a conversation with their representative, and they take it offline, and the media gets a hold of it in a professional way. And so the collective bargaining's come a long way, and I'm so happy to see that for the players.
How instrumental was Pat Quinn in helping that trade happen from Los Angeles to Buffalo?
Well, he arrived on the scene in my halfway through my fourth year, and Pat Quinn was the first one to actually ask me what I wanted to achieve. And I told him that I needed to get out of Los Angeles, and within he said, work hard and I'll do it. And I worked hard, and Scotty Bowman stepped in to help me, and traded for me, and I was off to Buffalo, and Sean McKenna, and I was off to Buffalo with Brian Engblom, and Sean McKenna and Larry Playfair were off to Los Angeles.
That's quite a departure, although as an Ottawa kid, I guess not too bad. Ottawa to LA's got to be a culture shock. Buffalo and its wintry weather there off the lake had to be somewhat of a homecoming for you.
Well, yeah, and it was a different environment. Scotty it was amazing, the teams that he put together, and to have the opportunity to experience how he worked. Like, he picked me up at the airport when I was traded there, and he told me on the way driving me to the hotel, he told me that he had been trying to trade for me for since before the draft, and that he believed in me, and that he was going to start me at center ice the first game. And I had never been talked like that. I've never been talked to like that in LA. It just never happened. They could have done it, I guess, but I went out and scored 13 seconds into my first game. I was the first star of the game, my first game with the Buffalo Sabres. And Mike Foligno and Paul Cyr were my line mates. Rest in peace, Paul. In the first 5 games there, my line had 27 points. And so I went from not being happy in LA and really being a healthy scratch in LA at that time to being on the top line in the National Hockey League. And it had nothing to do with my physical ability. It was all my emotional ability, and sort of the cumulative emotional trauma that I had experienced over a few years. So be aware of it. Right now, my work is speaking directly to that, and how to be aware of that sort of silent trauma that we suffer from.
Do you believe, Doug, that any of us has the ability to overcome adversity if we can identify, for example, that emotional trauma and find those more positive emotions, that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe it comes from environment. I think your environment programs you, and the latest work in psychiatry proves it. I spend my time with a lot of doctors and scientists today, to prove, a lot of theoretical work that's coming to pass. But, Dr. Georg Northoff is the leading psychiatrist in the space, and he wrote a series of books called Unlocking the Brain. They're like encyclopedias. Okay, but if you look at these two books, I'll show you the first one. That's coding, linear. It's linear going into the brain, and then consciousness. So you've got coding, the brain gets coded by what's around you, by your environment. You can't help it. You can't stop it. And then there's a gap, small gap, tiny gap, and then consciousness occurs. So you literally in life become what you're around. So the talent I was surrounded with as a young player in Nepean was off the charts. I had 4 guys on my baby Raider team that went pro. I mean, how does that happen? So, your environment is the most important thing for you to get uptake on your performance levels.
What was it, Doug, that soured your relationship with Scotty Bowman?
Oh, I became, if I may say so, I became an asshole because I became famous. My picture was on everything. It was on the side of the building. I was making music videos. I had never experienced that. I never went through that in LA, right? All of a sudden, I was a superstar, a household name everywhere I went. People knew who I was, and I didn't know. I didn't know how to handle it. I just did very uncharacteristic things. I stopped, mucking in the corner, all those things that happen to somebody who thinks they're more important than they are. And Scotty didn't know what to do with me, and we had a war, and Scotty ended up losing, and that particular war because he got fired, and then I came back to the Buffalo Sabres. So it was a really awful way to end the relationship. But I take full responsibility for that.
Years later, though, he was able to win at least the skirmish, I guess, when you were acquired by Pittsburgh.
Yes, yes, yes. I was playing for the Pittsburgh Penguins with Mario, and I was in contract negotiations at the end of the season. I had played out my option with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and Scotty Bowman was hired as director of player operations. I heard the news when I was driving with my wife down the Queensway. I think it was in June, and we both looked at each other and we knew that my NHL career needed to be put on pause. I was 27, so I didn't think it was over. I never thought it was over, but it had to be put on pause. And then I got the call 2 days later that negotiations had broken down. So just politics. I mean, there's more great players that never made it that ever did because of politics.
A bit of a tangent, but because you brought up Lemieux, having played with him, of course, in Pittsburgh, so you play with Mario, you play against Wayne. Do you want to just settle the ultimate bar bet right now, Doug, and tell us which was the better player?
Yeah, it's funny when people ask me that, I'm just blown away. And like nothing against Wayne. Wayne knows how to juggle like nobody I know. But when you're talking about hockey talent, when you play with Mario, he had one rule: you never go in the offensive corner with him because there's already two guys on him. You just get in the way. So he was single-handedly like the best, no question, the best, most talented, strongest, heaviest on the stick, biggest paddle that I've ever seen. Right. And Wayne, on the other hand, if he has 2 inches of space to when you're going to hit him against the boards going full speed, if he just has a little tiny bit of space, his whole body collapses at the same pace as you going to hit him. His whole body just folds. It's an unbelievable experience because I had many chances to run him through the boards, and I thought I did every time, but he had this magical way of just becoming part of the boards and just like sort of extending back out again. It was really, when I look at it now, it was magical because most guys I could take out, but like I tried for a long, long time. Dave Taylor knocked him out cold once in LA, and it cost us about 10 bench clearing brawls over the next 4 or 5 games. Because Semenko needed to get out there and finish that guy, finish Dave. So we had to protect Taylor for I don't know how long, about a year and a half.
Yeah, that was back in an era where you took a number and you didn't forget. Somebody had to pay for that, didn't they?
Oh yeah, yeah. It was part of the culture, and that's why today I'm able to talk about sort of the high performance culture because I'm very aware of what can hurt culture. Right. I experienced so many different cultures because everywhere you go, it's immediately a different culture. Like the Dallas Cowboys have a different culture than the Miami Dolphins, right? Like in the sports world, it's a different economy. And so you go into these places and they're like cities that you can study. And so today that's the thing that's wonderful for me. I get to interface with all that different information and figure out why we do what we do so that I can help stop people from doing the wrong thing, or help stop an athlete from taking that left turn and just guide them this way, right? Give them the option.
Without giving away too much of your work for free here, but are there overriding themes, Doug, that you have identified over your years that create that good culture?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing that you have to think about is there's three priorities of your subconscious because your subconscious controls you 95% of your human functioning. So meeting basic needs, clarity of thought, and helping other people are the three priorities. And so if you understand those three priorities, you're able to systematically break down, the negative effects of trauma that you're experiencing. So there's certain behaviors that feed those specific priorities. And when I say basic needs, I don't mean Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He wasn't Maslow's hierarchy wasn't incorrect. It was just incomplete. It never went into self-actualization. And so if you put a circle on top of Maslow's hierarchy and then an upside down pyramid, then you have self-actualization. So when I say meeting basic needs, food on the table, roof over your head, warmth, all the social things that we need. And then clarity of thought, the studies, Massachusetts University, the mindfulness-based stress reduction, it all works. It's scientifically sound. And then helping other people. The studies are off the charts. When we reach out to somebody and we give them a hand or just assist them across the road or point something out that was going to hurt them, we go away feeling elated, feeling wonderful about who we are. And so that's being measured now en masse, and we can see that helping other people is a priority in our life.
I've talked to a lot of players and a lot of coaches and managers on this podcast over the years, and you're the first, certainly that I can recall, that's actually brought up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now I'm thinking back to you being the OHL Academic Player of the Year, so maybe this was always in you, Doug, but I wonder, did this clarity of thought come following your devastating injury?
Well, I learned about clarity of thought because when I broke my neck and when I was paralyzed, I was I was left with nothing but my thoughts. And so I had to really use my mantra and my meditation. Now, I learned how to meditate when I was 13 and I was breaking things at home. And when I wasn't kept busy, I always started to do damage. So my mom didn't put me on Ritalin and medication. She took me in to meditation. So I went on a 2-week course, and then I stayed off of Ritalin. But I sort of left it behind, the meditation, when everything was going well. And then when I broke my neck and I ended up in a hospital bed in traction, it saved my life.
Okay, so let's jump across the pond here. Your time in the National Hockey League is done. You find a place to play in a European elite league, and you open your book. This story, I mean, I want to hear it from you, obviously, but I'm never going to forget this because of your level of consciousness and awareness while on the ice following the hit, including giving instructions to those who were coming to support you. But can you take us through what happened to you in that game?
Dump and chase, done it 1,000 times. We dumped the puck in from center ice. I was chasing it down. You can watch the video at DougSmithPerformance.com. And I went to hit the defenseman behind the net, going full speed just by the net, and I caught an edge. I put my hands up, and I didn't get them up in time, and I went top of the head first, about 22 miles an hour into the end boards, and shattered the fifth and sixth cervical vertebrae. So it was like the same as accelerating from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 1/3 of a second. That was the force, if you want to know the force. And so I heard my neck break. It was like a cascade of just crushing. It sounded like crushing chicken bones. And I fell to the ice with my head on my hands, and it was like lightning went through my body as soon as I hit the boards. It was like, just picture a lightning bolt going through your body. And I laid there on the ice with my head on my hands, and all I could see was all the times I had hurt somebody else. All the times I had done it on the ice, I had not said thank you to people. I had, we all have these things, and those were the things that I saw, and I realized that I had to go back and fix them, and I made a commitment that if I got out of that situation on the ice that day, and I survived, I would go back, and I've gone back to each team. I've gone back to Pat. I've reached out to Scotty. I've done like almost everybody on that path that I saw lying on the ice, which was a lot because it was just like a boom. I just realized that this hurting other people thing, just it doesn't help our health.
That's incredible clarity of thought when you're in a position where you may never walk again. I mean, you must have had some inkling based on the impact and the inability to get up, probably even move, that the damage was very extensive.
It was 3 months, one, two, three surgeries. And then I was brought back after a month in Europe to Canada. I moved into the rehab center, and then it was about a year in a hospital bed. And golf helped me get back because we lived on a golf course at the time, and so I used to go out every morning and walk as far as I could and just use my one arm that I had when I was able to use one of my arms, because I lost my bladder, my bowel, my arms, and my legs. And so I had to figure out what the priorities were. And the priorities were, of course, my bladder. So I had to get off of pain medication because I was on 250 milligrams of morphine a day for a year. And I was taking a knockout medication to sleep, yet I was having to be catheterized 3 times a day. And so we had 2 little kids. My wife was nursing a little baby. We had our second child a week before I was paralyzed. So we had a 2-year-old little girl and a 1-week-old little girl. And Patty had a husband who was a quadriplegic. So it was, I had to stop all my medication, and that was like going through the withdrawals like you see on the TV. I mean, it was ugly. But within 6 weeks of getting off that opioid medication, my bladder started working, and it's been working since. That was when I was 29 years old or 30 years old. And now I'm 59 and my bladder's still working, So getting off the opioids made a big difference. And I'm on that boat now with the Canadian Armed Forces and with veterans, veteranshouse.ca. Like we're trying to show everybody this, right?
Quadriparesis was a term I learned reading your book. I had not heard it before, not that I study a lot of this stuff by any stretch, but when you first heard that term and or diagnosis, how did it resonate with you?
Yeah, I when I was paralyzed, I actually went through a period of time where I didn't want to see anybody or believe anything that was going on. So, it wasn't until I became suicidal. One day in the hospital, I asked my wife to help me because I couldn't turn the paddles on in the hospital. And once we had it out with, ending it all, and we did have it out, everything started to change at that particular point. But good question.
So how did you find it within you? Like I think what happened to you, and this is what I honestly I'm not just trying to blow smoke here, Doug. What I loved about the book is how it kept coming back to the injury and your recovery from it. And then you'd move to another part of the pro career, and then you're back into the injury and the recovery from it. So I get the sense now that almost everything is viewed through the lens of what happened to you in that game in Europe, almost as if that was the defining moment that was supposed to happen to Doug Smith. But I don't know how on earth we're having this conversation today.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons that I teach change, right? Because it was a point in time where 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 it was change. I learned that change happens in an instant. It doesn't really happen over time. And I saw that. I made the commitment to change, and that's been what I've been doing for the last 25, 30 years is moving forward on that change that I made a commitment to right there.
How how important was it to have Patty's support through all of this?
Yeah, we're approaching 35 years of marriage, and Patty was. I couldn't stay in the rehab center when I was trying to get better because it was not a good place for me to be, and so we got a hospital bed from Carleton Place in our home, and I lived in the hospital bed while my wife fed our youngest, took care of the 2 kids and catheterized me and took care of me So she carried the load, knowing that I couldn't stay, in the hospital. I couldn't stay in that environment because at the time it wasn't a very good healing environment with the level of injury that I had. And so I learned about getting around your kids and getting around people who are moving around. And that was part of my learning experience about you become what you're around.
That's fantastic. And the difference that it would make. I mean, it makes sense to me intuitively, but you having lived it, it speaks volumes. Do you remember the first step, Doug, that you were able to take again?
I remember being in the rehab center and my wife coming around the corner and me being held by two people, and then they sort of let me go very slowly and let me walk on my own, and very spastic, like incredibly spastic. And like I remember in my mind, I thought I was skating pure. I thought I was on the penalty shot, perfect shape. And my wife was just like she broke down because that's not what she saw. So that tells you something about me. I tend to look on the positive side of things, or think that what people are seeing from the outside is actually better than it is. So I try not to be too naive these days.
You have entirely reinvented yourself. And this is one of the other things that I find so compelling about the story. We're talking to a high level, high performance athlete who went second freaking overall in 81 to the Los Angeles Kings. An injury so devastating you may never have even walked again, much less skate, which I know you do to this day too. But you've transitioned now into an incredibly successful business person who spends all of this time helping other businesses and business people become successful. How does that happen?
Well, I think we all, if we had something, a key that we could just give to people when we meet them, and we see them use the key and it works, it would motivate us to make more keys. And so I look at what I'm doing as making keys, like, and giving them to people. Now, some people aren't ready for them, and so when I present to audiences today, I take the 75%, really, it's 75% who aren't ready, and I get them ready in a way that they've never experienced before, and then they're ready. And then by the end of the presentation, I've got 100%. So I'm able to tap into the subconscious. I wish I could have tapped into Gretzky's subconscious, for crying out loud. Would have made it a lot easier. So today I'm able to tap into the subconscious of the audience and take them down a journey where they really can't go back, because when the brain sees a better path, it binds itself to follow that path. And if it doesn't follow that path, it falls into disrepair. So like these professional players are being shown good stuff over and over and over and over and over, and they follow the path and they follow the path and they follow the path and they just keep chipping away at it. And we all need to do the same thing. Maybe not at the same level as they're doing, maybe not as often, maybe not as strict, but that's the principle.
Tell me more about coding and consciousness that you made reference to before with your books on the brain. You had all this time, and you said that earlier, to think while you were recovering. But where did it all begin to settle onto the brain and its inner workings for you?
Well, you need to know what you got to work with, right?
Fair
So if
enough.
you have vertigo, for example, with the coding and consciousness, um, vertigo is one of these things where until you become conscious of it, you don't have it, right? It crosses over and from coding to consciousness. And so you can actually, the University of Montreal and Dr. Faubert, they're actually patching it now. So they put a little electrode on a piece of tape and put it on your head. And then when you go to have vertigo, it sends a little electric signal and it stops the vertigo, believe it or not. So if we can do that, with things that are causing us pain, and we can do it with a simple outside intervention, or just a small behavior change, your performance is going to go up. What we're seeing, it's really amazing. We're seeing an actual bump of between 200 and 300% when people start to use the part of their brain that they're not using right now, because there's 40% of it, believe it or not, that we're not using to forward our happiness and our productivity. So if I can help people tap into that extra 40%, because 50% is genetics and 10% is how much money you have, the job that you have. So when it comes to happiness and being productive, we got this 40% chunk that I'm focused on helping people with, and it can make a big difference for a business as well.
And you just need to find that right key, cut it, and pass it along so they can unlock, so to speak, that 40%.
Yeah, it's just simply looking at it. All you have to do is have a key to open a door to look at it. Trauma will cause you to back yourself into a jail cell if you don't address it. If you don't address what's going on with your performance, trauma will cause you to slowly back yourself into a jail cell. It will cause you to lock the door. And then in some cases, you'll throw the key away. And you won't even know that you're doing it to yourself because we're not equipped. And so part of what I teach is exactly what's happening to us. So everybody knows how this process works, and help them see what they couldn't see before. Because why would you teach somebody something they can already see? They know not to stab themselves in the hand with a fork, right? But they don't know how to stop the cumulative emotional trauma that is really affecting us today. And if you want some proof, you just have to look at the aftermath of 9/11. If you want a smaller version of it compared to a global pandemic, then look at the aftermath of 9/11 and you'll see the psychological fallout.
Is there any comparison at all, Doug, between, let's say, being in the locker room, dressing for your first playoff game versus preparing for the first presentation you made to a Fortune 500 company?
Yeah, the feeling in the stomach is the same. I can't eat. I spend the night before not able to. Like it really is the same feeling. So I haven't been able to distinguish a difference in the gut with respect to success. It doesn't. Everybody who's successful has it just the same as we have it. So if you're feeling nervous about trying something, as long as it's safe, take a chance, go for it. Jump.
Our viewers on YouTube for this episode are getting a real treat, and I would be remiss if I didn't get some of the stories behind what it is that's behind you. Directly behind you right now is the classic gold LA Kings jersey, number 23, Smith on the back, naturally. But that one comes from what I do believe remains to this day the biggest comeback in NHL playoff history.
Yeah, well, I can move a little bit here and let your viewers see. There's Gretzky, Messier, Coffee, Curry, and Fuhr, and I'm tucking it in number 15 in white.
Yeah, I was going to say, who's that guy celebrating in behind all of them?
Yeah, that's a game-winning goal. And then down here is the Queen Jubilee Medal from the Queen of England for the community work that we've been able to accomplish. And then there's a friend and the amazing Kreskin, probably the number one person in the world at understanding the subconscious brain. I think there's a lot of people that would agree with me. And then of course I've got two pucks, my first goal in junior and my first goal in the NHL, and then a few of my books and favorite things. And I got tucked in the back right here. Look at that guy.
Oh
Ron
my
McLean.
gosh.
Ron's been so supportive. He's been the most amazing guy with respect to my work and being available to me and helping and supporting me on the inside. So I really appreciate. Big shout out to Ron McLean, man. He's a super guy.
When you and I were chatting to arrange this conversation, you mentioned Kreskin to me. Give me that backstory, please, because as I said to you when you mentioned his name, those were my Saturday mornings as a kid. I remember the amazing Kreskin on television all the time. How did that meeting end up happening?
I was working with somebody at the time. He was coming into the casino Lac Limi to do his gig in front of 3,000 people, and I it was arranged that we would meet and have dinner and the night before and spend some time, just eating, breaking bread together, and getting to know each other. And I came armed with a question. I wanted to know the change that was going to happen, that was going to be the most expensive thing that we missed. What thing in society was going to be the thing we should be concerned about the most as a human race, but we don't see it yet. This was in 2017. So small screens, minors, and locked doors. Small screens, underage people, and locked bedroom doors is going to be the most expensive trauma that we experience as a society. That was in 2017, and you watch, this is going to come true. He's good at what he does.
That's wild. Absolutely wild. Now, that photo that you made reference to as well, you're wearing number 15 for the Buffalo Sabres. You've just scored against Grant Fuhr, and also in the picture, Wayne Gretzky, Jari Kurri, Paul Coffey. I'm missing one there. Who else is in that shot?
Oh, Curry, Coffey, Messier.
Oh, and Gretzky, of course, yeah.
Gretzky.
And then you scored on Fuhr.
And you can see that goal on my YouTube channel too. So I'm going to be putting up more and more. I think there's 50 or so, but there's going to be hundreds up there. And my message that I deliver today, compared to the goals I scored, will be up there as well. So I'm going to make sure that a lot of this information is available to people.
You had that photo signed by all of the participants in it, even though they probably didn't enjoy it as much as you did, but because you were back for the closing of the old arena.
Yeah. So when I was in Buffalo and I had a fallout, I was traded. It was at the same time Gretzky was being purchased by the Los Angeles Kings. So about a month after that happened, or just weeks after that happened, I went from Buffalo to Edmonton, and then I got bailed out by Vancouver. What was the question?
How you ended up getting that photo signed? Because I think it was when the old
Yeah,
LA, right?
yeah. So I had a short stint with the Edmonton Oilers for a few months, and so I got invited back for the closing of the Northlands, and that this was one thing that I brought with me that I didn't check in my bag. 3 originals, and they're all signed by all 5 guys and myself, and I got one for each of my daughters and one for my dad. The one you see behind me right there is on loan from my daughter.
That's so great. And I did start with the jersey, but I think the story behind it is best told by the participant, because I'm pretty sure that comeback from 5-0 down in the playoffs, you had the assist on the OT winner for the Kings, and it was over Gretzky and Kurri and all of those Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah, I scored the second goal of the game. And then the way the story goes, just so everybody knows, and you can just look up Miracle on Manchester, but we were up 5-0 after they were up 5-0 after 2 periods, the Edmonton Oilers. It was a playoff game. If we won the game, we would go back to Edmonton. If we lost, we were out. And so we were down 5-0 after 2. We came back and scored 5 goals in the third period, the 5th goal with just seconds left in the game. And then a minute into overtime, I went out to take the face off of Mark Messier in the right offensive corner, and I pulled it back to Darrell Evans, who had a cannon, and he ripped it through my legs over Grant Fuhr's shoulder, and we went back to Edmonton that night on the same plane as the Edmonton Oilers. So we had more smokers on our team. So the Edmonton Oilers got the front of the plane, and we got the back of the plane because you could smoke in the back of the plane. So we got the smoking section, but that was a real quiet flight for the Edmonton Oilers. And then we beat them actually out of the playoffs. We beat them 6-2. So like, it was such a shock. And the funny thing about it is they never made that mistake again, because when they were up 5-0, if you watch the Miracle on Manchester, you'll see how they were taunting us. And, the guys were just like, outrageously abusive, and so that really turned around to bite him. But they never did it again. So, I take a little bit of credit for all those Stanley Cups.
That's right. You taught them a little bit of humility that year,
You
Smitty.
got to keep teaching, right? If you can't do, teach.
Yeah, that's right. I told that to my father all the time. He spent 30 plus years as an educator, for sure. You mentioned that we can look up the miracle on Manchester, and of course we can. And that goal that's behind you, you scored as a Buffalo Sabre. It's on your YouTube channel. And you said earlier too, so too is the hit, you crashing into the boards that caused your catastrophic injury. Is it difficult for you to watch?
I've watched it enough now. I've analyzed it, and to the nth degree, I'm fortunate to have a picture of it and a video of it where I can do that, right? Because you'd miss part of it in your imagination, you wouldn't know. And so I've been very fortunate to be able to rip that apart, to unwind from it. I still get treatment today at my whole right side. I have needles in me. I'm getting acupuncture, Eastern medicine, Western medicine. Um, I'm all plant medicine, no opioids, no antihistamines. Like I'm not on any type of medication now. So I'm really pleased with where things are at from a health perspective.
I wanted to ask you, and before I let you go, Doug, the foreword to your book. You had your dad write it.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Well, I mean, he always, if you want to have an athlete and you want to raise an athlete, get them the best equipment. Don't skimp on equipment. My dad and mom couldn't afford what they bought for me, but it was always like the best glove, the best stick, the best bat. Like they let me practice with tools that were the best. Like you don't want to go in and try to build a house with a toy screwdriver, right? Or a toy drill. And so you parents out there, like if get them the best equipment, teach them how to take care of it, and let them practice with what the pros are playing with. And that would be a recommendation of mine.
Do you keep in touch with any of the guys you played with all those years?
Uh, yeah, I keep in touch with Jim Kite, who was the professor at Algonquin College and drafted the same year as me. We stay in touch. His career ended with a catastrophic physical injury as well. Um, and there's a few other guys that I touch base with a couple of times a year just to stay in touch with what's going on. And I participate with the Senators alumni from time to time. It's a great bunch of guys, and I hope Ryan Reynolds gets a piece of it. It'd be great.
Ryan Reynolds and Doug Smith in the same arena. I don't know if we're ready for that. Well, listen, this has been a real privilege and honor to have this conversation with you. The story is absolutely remarkable. And I think to see where you are at today, Doug, is inspirational for anyone listening to or watching this podcast. So thank you very much for making time for us.
Well, thanks for making this information available. And please point to my website. People can download just a simple checklist off the front page. They can see the accident on the front page and how I've surrounded it with something positive. And they can go to the traumacode.com or dougsmithperformance.com. You'll find me. I'm really accessible. I've worked really hard to be accessible, so don't hesitate to reach out. Really appreciate it, Mike.